begin talking about the Employment and Empowerment Project, I would just like to give some data on Canada's employment. So in July 2021, for youth, the national unemployment between ages 15 to 24 was 11.6%. And in British Columbia, the youth unemployment for the same age was 10.6%. Doesn't really seem that significant a difference, but it actually is quite a bit of a difference. And it would probably get worse because of the coronavirus and pandemic and everything. So we want to seek to address this imbalance. So what is the Employment and Empowerment Project, or what is EEP? So we want to be able to empower youth to navigate through the labor market and basically transition to sustainable employment. Sustainable employment is more or less minimum of 20 hours a week of employment. So as long as you're able to get 20 hours a week, you're sustainably employed. And to do this, we want to be able to employ for youth for 30 hours per week for 12 weeks. This is kind of a little bit like a job experience placement, where the employer doesn't really have to hire you, but since we're providing the training and the experience, I'll explain later on as well, but we'll be providing the wage subsidy for those things. They might as well hire you if you're suitable for the role. Essentially, that's what it is. So I have here kind of an advertisement for participants, kind of just talking about the things that we would be able to support. Also, my colleague Beatrice Wong is the contact for participants. So her contact information went right below. So her phone number 604-232-2404, and her email address, so beatrice@rcdrichmond.org. So you basically could contact Beatrice if you're interested in joining our project. There is also the last date to apply. It could be on November 30th, 2022. So you still have some time, but I think if you try to connect with us as soon as possible, we might be able to get you employed earlier. So who is eligible for the EEP? So as I said, we kind of work with youth. So between the ages of 16 and 30. Essentially, if you are 30 right now, you have until you turn 31. So we have to find you an employer that's interested in working with you, and we'd have to sign the form, the placement form, before you turn 31, and then you're good to go. You also have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, protected person, and you also have to be legally entitled to work in British Columbia and Canada. So yeah, so I'm going to go back to the age range. So you might as well connect with us as soon as you can, just to try to get the support necessary to get some work experience. Okay, so benefits. So paid work experience. So the federal government is providing us a funding to give to the employer 30 hours per week for 12 weeks. So that's actually a very beneficial thing to have, because sometimes employers, they might not want to hire people, especially if they have to put the money in themselves. And this actually gives a really good opportunity for some work experience and possible sustainable employment as well. And we also provide financial support as well. So I will explain a little bit later on, more in depth, what kind of financial support you could get. Also resume, cover letter. So we could help you with constructing those, or we could even review ones that you constructed yourself and kind of just provide suggestions on what could basically improve your employability. And also interview support. So some people might kind of feel like their interview skills aren't that good. They can't really talk about themselves in a positive light. So we would actually be asking you some questions during your eligibility interview and kind of just build on your interview skills. And we would also would be able to provide you some like mock interviews or whatnot, just to make you feel more comfortable talking to yourself. And there's also a chance to get your foot in the door. So sometimes um, like you might not be getting your foot in the door without some sort of wage subsidy or anything like that. So it does give you a perfect opportunity. Also, like it does take a lot of resources to hire people. So since we provide the training and the work experience for 3 months, they might as well hire you, right? If you're suitable for the role. But we'll talk more about this later in this presentation. Opportunity for networking. So sometimes they might not find you suitable for the role, so they might not hire you, but they also might have some ideas about other jobs you can do, or they have some other people that are looking for jobs or giving jobs, and they think you're suitable for the role, so they'll probably connect you there, or maybe even say you can use them for referrals if you want. If you able to build a relationship strong enough that you'd be able to use them as a referral, you could definitely do that, because a lot of people have difficulties kind of building this relationship and trying to get enough referrals to be kind of just have the appropriate amount of referrals. I think right now is like minimum 3 referrals for work, and that's a little bit difficult for some people. And there is also the eligibility for a $300 completion bonus. I'll explain a little bit more later on, but if you are able to successfully finish a work experience placement, you might get $300. It would depend on a few things, but it's just if you're able to kind of work with us, then you would get the $300 after your work experience placement. So that sounds pretty good. Okay, so support. Like I mentioned before, we do provide some support in for the participants in our project. So relevant program fees, that might mean, so if you're talking with us and we kind of ascertain that you might need some more certifications or programs, then we might suggest a few that you can take, and we actually might be able to provide some funding for that. So we reimburse you for that, depending on what it is. For instance, like first aid, serving it right, and all that. So I might be able to give you some money for those programs. And dependent care as well. So if you have a child and you're worried that you might not have enough kind of finances to support that child while working, we may be able to support you that way. So we may be able to support you while you're working, kind of like child minding. There's also a kind of a category for emergency expenses that we might have. Transit pass, actually that's very important, because transit is a lot of people use transit, and some people might not be able to pay for that. some people with PWD or other related government supports, it might be a little tricky, but because you want to claim that with your PWD, but this is also kind of paying it out a little bit. We'll have to talk about that more, but it shouldn't be that difficult. And also materials as well. For instance, hearing protection or steel-toed boots. So some employers, they would be able to pay for those type of things. Some wouldn't. So if you need any of those materials and you need it for work, then we will be happy to reimburse you after we kind of connect and talk more about what you need. Right. Okay, so the process for participants. So as I mentioned before, eligibility screening. So this one's actually very important because if we aren't able to find you as eligible, then we wouldn't be doing this. So you'd have to have, to be eligible, 16 to 30, Canadian citizen, protected citizen, or an immigrant, and able to work in Canada and British Columbia. And you'd also have to have some significant employment barriers. We do work with all youth, but we want to focus on those with significant employment barriers. So this may mean you have a child that has a disability, you don't have as much education as other people, you might might be lacking in for high school degree, you might have a disability yourself, you might have housing instability, or you might your English might not be the first language, so I think that provides kind of a barrier to you for employment. So those are the type of employment barriers that we're looking for, and we'll be able to assess you at the meeting. For the meeting, it'd be approximately 30 minutes, and we'd also have the meeting through virtually through Google Meet. That's a kind of like Zoom, and you don't really need. It's very intuitive, so you don't need a Google email account, and you just point and click basically. So it's we could either meet virtually or we can meet at the center. So the Richmond Centre for Disability is located at Vincent Centre in Richmond. So we'd be happy to see you, happy to happy to meet with you and just kind of discuss about your eligibility as well. Okay, so register as EEP participant. So after a week after that, we would be able to kind of assess that you are eligible, and we'll also give you some forms to sign. So one of the forms might be, I'll talk more about these forms later, but one of these forms would be participant placement form, and the other one would be the eligibility for completion bonus form. And after we do that, we might need your SIN card and also your government ID. That's a little bit later on. And after that point, we prepare your resume. So you could send us the resume for the eligibility screening. It's completely fine. Or you can send it to us after. I think it's best if you send it to us before, but it's completely up to you. So this way we'd be able to kind of tell if your resume is appropriate, if it's like how recent is it, and if you need any more support with your resume. Also your cover letter as well. And we'd be probably kind of be talking about interview strategies and whatnot. And also, let's see, match with employers. So there are several ways that we will be able to match with employers. So the conventional method is after you're found eligible, You're just telling us about jobs that you want to do. Like, so say you want to become a barista, and then we'll ask about you and what you want to do as a barista, and then if you have any interested employers that you're actually looking to work at for. So you want to work at like blends or something like that, then we try to match up with blends. For bigger organizations such as that, does get a little bit more difficult. We're kind of focusing on local employers, so smaller organizations, less bureaucracy and things to deal with. But we also do kind of try to match up with bigger companies like that. So after the conventional method is just finding out employers that you might want to work for, or you could seek out the employers yourself. So you could look online. So especially now, jobs, there are some jobs that we can't help you apply for. It's like online jobs and jobs that only have an application that you can submit online. So we won't be able to help you with that. So you could definitely, the most preferred method is you to connect with us, and you could tell us what kind of jobs you want, and we could talk to you more about things that we can apply for you, and then you could talk more about things you could apply yourself. And yeah, I think that would work the best. We have a personalized letter that describes the EEP project, or EEP, so that you might want to give to provide interviews in the end. So essentially, where you're talking, you're basically talking with the employer, and if it sounds like it's good, if it's a good match, you could kind of mention the project and how you're eligible, and how the government will be paying for 30 hours a week for 12 weeks. And at that point, it's going to be minimum wage. So if your job that you want to apply for and you get accepted is a little higher, we would kind of talk with the employer to kind of get them to pay the extra difference. So say if you're paid $20 for that job, so we'd be able to provide $15.20 an hour for that job, and the employer would kind of top it up. Okay. So yeah, you could talk about the project and provide my contact information. So the EEP letter that we have has all that information. So I was able to actually have a participant that was able to get a successful work experience placement, and it seems like she might get hired on full time. So she connected through the employer through Indeed, and that was like probably took a week before she was asked to come in for an interview. And she had an interview. It seemed to work well, and then she mentioned that she's part of this project, and she gave the letter and my contact information. So in the end, we were actually able to get the participant employed just within a week afterwards too. So it's actually pretty impressive. But before we get the ball rolling, we had to kind of jump through some hoops with the employer. So we'd have to get the documents all signed. There is a separate like type of documents that we might get signed with the employer. But as it seemed like they wanted to work with our participant very soon, so we kind of had to get the ball rolling really fast, which I think we're good with. And also we had to do some site visits as well before the participant started her work experience. We basically do site visits before and during the work experience placement. This is mainly just to ensure that the participant and now candidate is supported and safe. And yeah, so okay, so yeah, you could just leave the questions for a little later on, because I do have a section for questions. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes, interview with employer. So yes, like I said before, um, my participant or candidate was able to get an interview with the employer, and she provided the information. She got hired by the employer. So we're still keeping in contact with the employer and also the candidate, and we're kind of just making sure that they're both feeling supported. So if the candidate had some problems doing something, uh, she might kind of tell us about it and then tell us the reasons why she would have these problems, and we might kind of talk with the employer to kind of address these problems. We kind of really want to build a relationship where it's a strong relationship and that isn't adversarial as well. And this way, we would kind of make sure that they have a really good relationship that they could kind of build on. We do have some sort of like evaluation forms and efficacy forms that we might have to get the candidate and the employer to fill out, but I'll explain that later on. And yes, the evaluation. That's important as well because we want our participants and the employer to feel completely supported. All right. Okay. So how to get started? As I mentioned before, first step would be to contact us. So contact Beatrice through email or through our phone number, our main office line. And then we'll set up a eligibility screening. So we'll set up a time for us to meet. So we can meet through virtual means, or we can meet through in person because we just opened our doors to the public again, and we'll be happy to see you. Although if you want to come in, you'd have to have your vaccination shots. So we'll be kind of scanning you in if you wanted to do that way. Next, we'll be developing career plans. So if we kind of ascertain that you need some sort of development before you could be employed, we might kind of talk about that as well. We might even talk about that before the eligibility screening. So we do have, I have a colleague that actually works extensively with people with disabilities that kind of with career plans, employment plans, volunteerism, and all that. So if we kind of feel like you're not right, you're not in the right step yet to work, we kind of refer you to this colleague. But I'll explain more about my colleague later on. So if you're able to work, then we'll kind of see what kind of avenues that you might be able to build on, what kind of, if you need any additional training, additional like interview skills and strategies and whatnot. Okay, and also you'd be submitting your resume, so we could be honest with you and tell you if your resume looks good or not, if you need to make a new one. We would be able to work with you on that as well. I also have the same colleague that may be able to help you work on your resume and cover letters. And the interview process. So this is basically after the mock interviews, if you need it, you'll have an interview process with the employer, and hopefully you'll be successfully hired. And we'd have our own kind of stuff that we do with the employer and with the participants as well. Actually, sorry, 1 second. Okay, so I'm just go back to the your hired part. So we kind of want to impress on the employer to hire our candidates full time afterwards. So it's not going to be like, okay, we're just going to find employers that want temporary work, want temporary employees. It's not that. We just, for our eligibility for our employers, we kind of want to ask specific questions that would indicate to us whether or not the employer was looking for someone to work full time. So we want to look at their stance on hiring someone before the work experience begins. So there are some people that might have concerns about that, so that's why we're trying to address this. Or some people might just want some more experience, so that they don't really care whether or not they stay on afterwards, which makes sense. So depending on the situation, we'll try to connect the employer with the participant in that sense. So yeah, don't worry. As like if you're suitable for the role and they could hire you, then they should hire you, essentially. We want to make that certain. Try our best to be certain. Okay, so site visits, like I mentioned before, so we will have pre-site visits and site visit in general. We might, like, few weeks in, we might kind of tell you that we might be visiting your site just to see if everything's okay, if you need some support, if the employer needs support as well. But we'd be telling both the employer and also yourself that when we do it, and if you have enough time to kind of set that up for us to be able to come in and observe just for a little bit. And also, I might have some evaluation forms. I might just ask a few questions for the employer or for the participant as well. And after work experience. So as mentioned before, we really want them to hire you, and we really want them to have sustainable employment in the end. But it's not necessary. Our objective isn't sustainable employment. Our objective is work experience. So there are a lot of people that are just lacking in some experience from working, and we want to be able to provide that for them. But it makes sense just to approach sustainable employment in the future, just in case. And after the work experience, you get $300 completion bonus, which is pretty good because yeah, there's money. It's good to have money on the side. Okay. So after you contact us, eligibility screening. So it might take like a week or so before meeting with us and before being told that you are eligible. Intake forms, I'll explain it in the next slide. So it's just 2 forms that you need to do. And your SIM card and your ID has to be given to us as well, but not really time sensitive at the moment. And that's because the government requires us to have this information to ensure eligibility. So yeah, just to make sure you're the right age and you're eligible for the project. And review resume and cover letter, like I mentioned before. We kind of want to build on that and kind of make sure even your interviews skills are good as well. And depending on the situation, depending on your situation, we might have periodic meetings. So if you require additional support, we'd be able to provide that for you. And then we kind of move on to seeking and connecting with employers. So like I mentioned before, I think there's more than 2 ways, but the 2 common ways is basically us kind of helping you find work. We will tell you, of course, before applying, but yeah, us doing that, or you can look for jobs yourself, and hopefully you'd be communicating with us along the way, so telling us what jobs you've applied to and everything, and if you're successful, and yeah, and let us know if you have any interviews with any of the employers, so we'll be able to give you some support. For example, had a participant that was able to get an interview, And it was a it was an interview within a couple of days, and so I decided just to meet up with them early, just to meet up a day early, just to talk about the meeting and talk about the interview and how we could be able to incorporate our project into the conversation. So I kind of told this person just to do an interview, just relax, and if the interview is going well, kind of bring up this EEP up and try to see if they would bite essentially, and they did bite, so well, that was good. Okay, so like I said, the intake forms. So on the left, it's going to be the eligibility for completion bonus. So basically, just kind of has some stipulations on like whether or not you work to improve employability skills and you responded, um, and that the employer is satisfied with your work, that you are relatively punctual, because even though you're working, you're hired as an employee of their organization, so you're paid by them, and we just reimburse them. You are representing Richmond Centre for Disability as well in that sense. So we want to be able to provide a positive approach to everything that we do. Okay. And also on the right, it's the participant placement agreement for work experience. So you would have to be um, kind of signing this. We could do it through digitally as well. So it could all be digital, both forms. And essentially just your legal name and just kind of tells you more about the project and what we do. So on the job support, you might have a $300 completion bonus. We provide some training fees that we might be able to provide for you, like first aid or food safe, and just some stipulations as well. Okay, all right, uh, almost done there. So no worries. Participant needs. So this is kind of like pre-employment support for participants. The resume, cover letter, assistance, certifications needed to be employed. So if you need food safe to be a server or a kitchen staff, we'll have to get that done, and we might be able to provide that for you. Living expenses, or any other financial aid, or on-the-job support. So maybe you might need a transit pass or someone to mind your child while you're working. We might be able to provide some support there as well. So what happens after 12 weeks? So I explained before, hopefully you would achieve sustainable employment with the employer if you want. So we'd actually have to ask you that as well, if you want to work there in the end. Um, so basically we'd be asking the participant if they are interested in working with the employer near the end of their work experience placement, because not like it's hard to kind of ascertain if you actually like the job itself. So we want to be able to just ask a few questions, see if you want to stick on. Um, like mentioned before, we want to be able to have employers that support sustainable employment. So we'd be asking them beforehand whether or not they feel up to hire suitable employees. Um, so depending on your situation, then we'd be able to provide that support. Evaluation form and efficacy survey. So basically, those two are kind of interchangeable. Just kind of provide some support on like some questions on how, if you think you benefited from our project, if for the employers, if their candidate is good, and if they require any more support. So we want to give these questions as soon as possible, just to make sure that everything is kind of solved before it gets worse. And you're eligible for the $300 completion bonus if you kind of do all that correctly. Like, for instance, if you're able to be kind of employed, like, and you're also able to actually no, never mind. Lost my train of thought. Okay, so we're not done yet, but this is resource EEP. So our website has further information about our project, Employment Empowerment Project, or you could scan the QR code for the same website. So I'll give you guys a few seconds if you want to do that yourself. And I'll also talk more about some supports that you might get if you don't want to work 30 hours a week, or you don't think you're eligible if you're like past 30 years old, or you think that you kind of want to work, but you don't want to work that much. So you want to work like 10 hours a week. So we do have some support for you. All right. Okay, I'm moving on now. Additional resources. So our Richmond Centre of Disability has a Get Good series on employment over here. So it's on YouTube. We had it late January 2022, where I kind of talked more about this project. Essentially, it'll be the same kind of information as what I'm giving you right now. But if you want some more support, you could feel free just to watch this. I think it's 30 minutes. If you have time, it's up to you. And again, the deadline to apply would be November 30th, 2022. And it's better to apply sooner rather than later, because we still need to get you connected with an employer as well. All right, so, oh no. Oh, snap. All right, thank you for being patient with me. So if you're not eligible for the Employment Empowerment Project, we do have another project that we're currently running as well. So this project is called Supports for Independent Living. So if you want to kind of volunteer more or want to build experience through either volunteer or through work experience, my colleague Louise Gaudry will be able to do that for you. It's kind of a little bit different because her project, she's not really hands-on, and she doesn't connect you with employers. So she'll be able to provide support for you in terms of just determining whether or not you require things that would make you more employable. And it's not just employability, it's kind of just everything, really. So if you require like community participation, then you'll be able to get that information as well. And she does have a lot of information on supports for you as a person with disability. And later, next slide, I'll let her explain. It's got a short video clip of her talking about herself and what she does. And yeah, come right up. Okay. So you guys weren't able to get audio, right? Okay, sorry about that. Might have. I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second. Thank you, Beatrice.
Hi, I'm Louise, and I'm the SIL coordinator here at the Richmond Centre for Disability. SIL stands for Supports for Independent Living, which is the employment and pre-employment project here at the center. It is comprised of two streams. The first is resources for career development, which includes Job Club and more recently In Motion and Momentum Plus. The second is resources for community participation, which can mean anything from I'd like to do some volunteer work in order to get some references to use in my job search to I'm not really interested in finding employment. I'm more interested in learning more about what types of recreational programs are out there that I can participate in. To be eligible for my project, you need to be a person 18 or older who has a disability. So that is a little bit different from Vincent's program. He's focused on youth, as you already heard, and youth with barriers to employment.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Louise, for setting that up for us. So yes. So she kind of works with 18 years or older people self-identified as with a disability, whereas my project works with people with employment barriers. But as we are a center that works with disabled persons, we have a lot of support and also a lot of participants that have some sort of disability. So this is a resource for SIL as well, Sports for Independent Living. So there's a website and also a QR code for Louise's project. So you can feel free to just scan if you like. All right, so this is some more information about the EEP. So it's my information right down over here. So Vincent at rcdrichmond.org. There's Beatrice, contact information as well. So she's the employment support coordinator at Beatrice at rcdrichmond.org. Or there's the supports for independent living. So there's also her email as well, Louise at rcdrichmond.org. So essentially, we could all help you kind of help you out, just depending on your situation as well. All right, so okay, so questions. So I'm just gonna read. Okay, all right. Okay, so for Mindy's question from the Okanagan, we actually might be able to connect you with that. It'll be a little bit more difficult for us. I'm just gonna stop sharing. Actually, yeah, I'll keep sharing. So it's actually, we might be able to support you. I think the best bet is just to get in contact with us. We do need to provide site visits for the job, but as the coronavirus pandemic has hit us especially hard, we might have to kind of try different methods of providing the site visits. So we could either like we could find ways against doing the traditional site visits for jobs. So I hope that answers your question, Mindy. We might be able to help you out with that. Okay. Oh yeah, that's a good question. That's a good statement. So Zoom employers too. As we are becoming more and more virtual, working at home is actually we actually kind of talked about that during our in-person, like our project discussion at like our project discussion. So there is a possibility for you to do virtual work or at home work, and that's also a possibility. So if you're thinking of doing like working from home, we would be able to do that it actually might be a little bit better than if you were to work at somewhere in Okanagan, because that might be even more difficult for us to ascertain if the site's safe and stuff. I think we could even work like in Victoria or whatnot. Is there any other questions? You could even speak. I'm happy to kind of talk to you about it as well. Or is there anything regarding the SIL project that you guys want to know more about?
Vincent, it's Mindy.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm a job developer for the Neil Squire Society, so we do similar services.
Mhm.
So I was just inquiring if you're able to provide services out in this area, and if I run into any stumped placements, and I can call you guys, see if you have ideas. I'm going to
Okay, sure.
forward your information to our Lower Mainland staff. There's several people there that are working with people with disabilities and helping them get jobs using wage subsidies as well. So be good for you guys to know each other.
Oh yes, that's awesome. Thank you very much, Mindy.
No problem.
And that's Neil Squire, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, anything else? All right, thank you very much for attending this Connectra virtual meeting. I want to thank Connectra again for inviting me to present. And it's actually it's very, very good to finally talk more about our project and our organization to kind of expand this information out there to provide some support for people if they require it. So thank you very much.